Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon for my sixth period. Today we're going to be talking about World War One, which is one of the biggest wars in world history. It's called World War because several countries fought in it. And World War One started in 1914 in Europe. It was the Central Powers, which was Germany and Austria-Hungary, against the Axis powers, which was Britain, France, and Russia. And you just have to remember the Central Powers, the two countries that were in that were Germany and Austria, and the Axis powers were Britain, France, and Russia. If you guys take world history too, some of you guys may not, you'll learn more about World War One. But it was many reasons why the war was fought. Essentially, there was a prince of Austria-Hungary. He was assassinated. And Germany and Austria-Hungary, they were good friends, and they had an agreement saying that if anybody goes to war with them, that they have to fight no matter what. And then Britain, France, and Russia had the same thing. So Britain, France, and Russia all went to war against Germany and Austria-Hungary. And the guy that died from Austria-Hungary, he was actually an archduke. He wasn't a prince, but he was just a leader of Austria-Hungary, and he was shot and killed in his car, and that's when the war started. So the U.S. involvement in World War I, at the beginning of World War I, the United States remained neutral, which means they didn't support either side. So they weren't going to support England, they weren't going to support Germany, they were kind of just letting them fight. They didn't want to get involved. And lots of Americans supported isolationism. And isolationism means they wanted to be isolated and not get involved in the war. So isolated is just when you're by yourself. And the United States, they didn't want to get involved. Wars are very expensive. This was a very, very big war. It's not like it's a tiny war with Spain, the Spanish-American War. This is even much bigger than when we fought England. This is even bigger than the Civil War. So the U.S., we're trying not to get involved in this. However, eventually the United States does enter the war, and here are some of the reasons I'm going to list. The first one is the U.S. enters the war in 1917 after repeated German warfare, and German submarines were attacking U.S. boats, and it's actually called German submarine warfare. And submarines are like boats, but they're underneath the water, so it's a little bit different than a boat. But Germany had lots of submarines, and they were sinking lots of boats from the United States. They were also sinking boats from England, and a lot of the boats they sank weren't even Navy boats. They were just boats that had people on them for fun. And one of the big ones was Germany bombed and sank a boat named the RMS passenger liner Lusitania, and when they sank the Lusitania, which nobody was in the army, it was just civilians, regular people, 1,198 people died, and including 128 Americans. The Lusitania was a British boat, and it took people on cruises. They're supposed to have fun on the boats, but when it was going, Germany thought they had weapons, so Germany sank the boat, and almost 1,200 people died. And there are several other reasons why the U.S. enters the war. The United States had close ties with England. So, I mean, we used to be part of England, and we went to war with England. We got independence. So we didn't get along with England at first. But in the 1900s, we get along with England pretty well. So when England fights the war, we kind of support them. The U.S. also entered the war because of the Zimmerman Note. And essentially, Germany sent a note to Mexico saying if they attacked the United States, they would help give them land. So Germany's telling Mexico, attack the United States. Okay, if you attack them, we're going to help you. And we're also going to give you lots of land if you attack the United States. So lots of Americans didn't like that Germany wanted Mexico to attack us. And those are the reasons why we went to war. And the American president, Woodrow Wilson, he has a very famous quote, and he said, "We need to make the world safe for democracy." So he's saying democracy, kind of like what England had a democracy at this time. They vote for a prime minister. The United States has a democracy. France had a democracy. A lot of these countries have democracies where people vote, whereas the Central Powers, where Germany was, Austria-Hungary, they were not a democracy. So Woodrow Wilson said we need to make the world safe for democracy. And World War I ends. Really, America, when they came, the war ended pretty quickly. So the war started in 1914, and the United States joins the war in 1917, and the war ends in 1918. Let me make sure I write that down. Ends in 1918. And World War I is one of the worst wars in history, with over 17 million people. Well, as 17 million people died, and over 20 million people were injured. So that's a lot of people. The Civil War in the United States was about 6 million. World War I had over 17 million people die, and over 20 million people were injured. And the war ended up costing a lot of money, not just on weapons, but because a lot of stuff was destroyed. They say the war cost over $180 billion. And that's back in the 1918s. All right? $180 million back then was a lot of money. Here's some examples why the war is so expensive. There was lots of cities, especially in France, that were completely destroyed. You can see this city right here was destroyed. This city was destroyed. I mean, look at this city right here. Everything is gone. It was just completely blown up. So World War I, lots of people died, lots of people were hurt, and it was very, very expensive. And after World War I, the United States president, his name was Woodrow Wilson, he wanted to make a 14-point plan. And in this plan, he wanted to eliminate the causes of World War I. So he did not want another war to happen. So his goal was to make this plan that would prevent it from happening. And there's 14 points of his plan, but we're only going to talk about 3 of them. But 3 of the big ones that you need to know is he wanted self-determination. He wanted countries to decide their own statehood and allegiances. He wanted countries not to have to do something if they don't want to, that they can make their own decisions is what he wanted. Second one is called freedom of the seas, which is boats are allowed to travel on the sea wherever they want. So even if it's a time of war, if boats are just going by and they're doing trade, or it's a cruise boat, they're allowed to go wherever they want. They should never be stopped on the sea, even in the time of war. Remember that Lusitania, which had almost 1,200 people died. I mean, that's 1,200 people that were killed. And remember, those people weren't soldiers. Those were women, those were children, those were men. They were just on vacation and they died. And he wanted to create something called the League of Nations. And this was a group of nations that make decisions in order to prevent war. So if countries are thinking about fighting instead of fighting, they go to the League of Nations, they kind of argue, they talk about what they want to do, and then the League of Nations would make decisions so people don't go to war. And after the war, there was something called the Treaty of Versailles, which is an agreement. So lots of countries made an agreement, and the big thing was France and England wanted to punish Germany. Germany was part of the Central Powers along with Austria-Hungary, and France and England really wanted to punish them because Germany went into France and England, and especially France was attacked by Germany, and you saw the pictures of France. They were destroyed. And when the League of Nations was created, they changed the boundaries of several countries, and new countries were born. So for instance, Austria-Hungary actually doesn't exist anymore. There's no longer a country called Austria-Hungary. That's because when the League of Nations was made, they changed it, and they also started lots of new countries. This is an example right here of what I'm talking about. So Europe before World War I, you see where Germany is. It's very big. Austria-Hungary is right here. And after the war, look at Germany is cut in half. It's much smaller. Poland is a country now. It wasn't there before. Latvia is a country. It wasn't there before. Czechoslovakia is a new country. Austria is a new country. Hungary is a new country. Romania got bigger. Look at Yugoslavia. That wasn't there before. So lots of countries get bigger. And Austria-Hungary no longer exist. And the Treaty of Versailles also created the mandate system. And the mandate system was created in the Middle East. And Austria-Hungary essentially had to give up territories in the Middle East. And Germany also had to pay $63 billion because they fought in the war. And remember, $63 billion back in 1918 was a lot of money. And they wanted Germany to pay that amount of money. And back to the League of Nations. Remember, Woodrow Wilson wanted the League of Nations, but many people debated if the United States should or should not join the League of Nations. And many American senators objected to the League of Nations because they did not want people from other countries making decisions for them. So, remember, if you're in the League of Nations and they make a decision, you have to follow them. And lastly, the United States senators did not approve of the Treaty of Versailles, which led to the United States not joining the League of Nations. So we ended up not joining the League of Nations because the United States did not agree with the Treaty of Versailles. They thought it was too strict. They thought Germany had to pay too much money. Some people thought Germany, it wasn't even their fault that they were in the war. So the United States, they did not agree that Germany should be punished so much. So they did not approve the Treaty of Versailles. So the United States did not join the League of Nations. All right, that's it for World War I. If you guys have any questions, let me know.